I see James Palmer, it starts going viral that the Raiders had kind of done a Gruden, and they didn't do a lap around the outside of Arrowhead. They had gone to the center of the field, Terrell Owens style, and had done a pump-up speech. And I was thinking, this is probably getting overhyped on Twitter. Fucking a lot of people on the field. You and I, countless games in our lifetime, pregame. A lot of people, moving parts, hard to even tell what's going on. Not the case at all. Not a fucking soul on the field. The Chiefs were clearly all gone. It was just the group of Raiders, however many guys are dressed, 45 in the middle of the field, guy. And then they showed a replay as, I think, right as the game was starting. Ndakwe was waving them up. They were doing their normal thing, probably at like the 20-yard line or whatever. Like any team would have done, no one would have said a word. But they made a conscious effort following, one of their better players who's been there 9 games, telling them to come on down and let's, give a pump-up speech on what looks like them and the Patriots, the two cream of the crop. The Titans, too, if they got Derrick Henry report today. He's coming back.
Yeah, there's nothing quite like calling everybody over in school to your big fight and then getting punched in the jaw within the first 8 seconds, which is exactly what happened to them. Like, the reason, because I was on Twitter as that game started, I'm like, why is everybody watching Raiders Chiefs? Like, I couldn't quite figure it out. Everyone was reacting to the game because they had a fumble 6 in the first 8 seconds.
First play game.
Well, the reason they were watching the game is because Yannick Ndakwe threw up the bat signal. James Palmer tweeted it, and everybody's like, oh, shit, what's about to happen in this Raiders-Chiefs game? And the answer is the Chiefs are going to go up, 32, 33, whatever the score was, to nothing, and 35 to nothing in like less than 30 minutes. It was incredible. But it all started because the Raiders did this idiotic thing like they were about to smack Kansas City.
Do you agree that sometimes, and this is just true in pro sports, and I would just say the way the sport is covered now with social media, and I do think the word like clickbait can be overused. Like we don't get credit for clickbait. Now certain things like Florio, if you have a website, clickbait does matter. But if you just click on a podcast and listen for a second, like nothing happens. We don't get any money. So clickbait to me kind of universally gets used incorrectly a lot. But like a story like that can just go viral, sometimes it can not be true, or can be like, I would just say the hyperbole behind the event can just kind of be an overreaction. And that's just kind of what I assumed. And then when you see the visual, it was the opposite. It was truly like, if I was a Chiefs fan, if I was a Chiefs player, I'd be like, what the fuck are these guys doing? And then like you said, it was 7-0 on the first play of the game, and by halftime, I was going to say it was 35-0, but no, the Raiders' gutless special teams coach, who I hear is a great guy, but as a head coach, and remember, we talked a lot of shit when Tom Sula did this years ago, to kick a field goal, to act like, oh, well, it's just, you got to get points on the board. You're down 35-0. You get zero
credit. Made it a 4-score game, John. It was going to,
you get zero credit.
4 touchdowns and 4 2-point conversions.
Now, as several people said on social media, they had to justify the money that they just gave to the guy holding the field goal and the guy kicking
that was a
the
good
field
tweet.
goal. And I said, okay, that makes a little sense. But there's nothing more embarrassing than just trying to get points, to be like, well, we got points. Well, you lost fucking 75-3, so no one cares.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've gone.
It's irrelevant.
This year's been a roller coaster for them, but this is what it should look like, because this is what it looks like all the time. Nothing has
final
changed.
Score of the game? Because I was going to look. I do
48-3. 40.
It was 48-9.
48-9.
Renfro had a touchdown, and then he missed the extra point.
This tweet from PB Wilson on the internet. He was at the game. They played Wheels of the Bus go round and round at the end of the game in Arrowhead.
Can you play that? Oh, it won't play through the deal, huh?
Yeah. Wheels on the bus go round and round. I might be able to play it. I don't know. But yeah, Wheels of the Bus. Like, this happens every year, once a year, once every 2 years. There's just that league, that division, excuse me. The Raiders and the Chiefs play an important game that ends in a bloodbath. It happens all the time. Like, you can change coaches, you can change offensive linemen, you can change quarterbacks. Unfortunately, this is what the franchise is right now. It just is. It's now you could say, oh, it's just one game, whatever. They're not a playoff franchise. They are not a consistently competitive franchise.
Guy, 89-28. 89-28.
Those are the two Chiefs games?
Is the score of the two Chiefs games. I had forgotten the Chiefs scored, obviously they kicked their ass on that Sunday night game, 41-14. And we even said like that final score looked a little tighter than what we actually witnessed. Because I think they were on Monday night, they were on Sunday night, and then the Niners played the Rams on Monday night. It was like a little bang banger. Listen, you kind of hinted at it. The Raiders, for a team that has been semi-competitive these last couple years, gets destroyed and blown out more consistently than any decent team. And obviously, they're no longer the Lions these last several years. Like, they have been much better. Last year, they went 8-8. The year before, they went 7-9. This year, they're going to end up, who knows, maybe 7-10 or whatever.
Yeah.
But, they probably should have been an 8 or a 9 win team, regardless.
They might get the 8.
For whatever reason, at Browns, Broncos, at Colts, Chargers, like, it's not going to be easy.
Yeah. No.
Are
they going to be underdogs in every one of those games?
They get the Broncos at home, but I would say the Broncos
Vegas?
do feel better in Vegas.
Easy trip for Broncos fans.
That'll be a Bronco home game. I just think that, listen, was it Mark Davis's fault they lost today, or that John Gruden sent those emails, or that Henry Ruggs got in the car wreck? Of course not. But the one consistent theme of the last decade of them constantly, sometimes they win 4 games. This year they win 7. But they have the same game in every year more often than a lot of like 8-8 teams. They have several games this season. Now, it all happened after the Ruggs thing, but still like 41-14 against the Chiefs. The Bengals beat them 32-13. Like, that is an ass kicking in the NFL. To me, 32-13 in the NFL is the equivalent of an Alabama, Florida, LSU type game where they beat their opponent 50-20. Like, that's a bludgeoning. And then today was probably the biggest ass kicking of the year. Like 35-3 at halftime. What is the college equivalent to 35-3 at half? 55-7? 35 in the NFL?
When you texted me that today, my first reaction was, I think it might be worse than 55-7. But I think that's probably right.
Yeah. Doesn't it feel 35 points and a half for an NFL team is as hard as it can get? Like, that's as much as they can score.
Yes, like there's not enough time or possessions to score more than that.
Well, how many? Yeah. That's 7 touchdowns. Like, how do you, that's 5 touchdowns. It's 7 points. How do you score 5? How many possessions you usually get a half? 6? Like, that's obviously it takes a defensive score. Like, you got to be remarkable. And they were. I mean, they were just kicking their ass. But they started kicking their ass with screens, and it's just this notion.
Was that Jamal Charles? Or no?
No, that was
what was the game?
That was Jamal Charles that hit him on the screens.
Yeah.
Same type deal. They hit him a couple today.
This week it was Jamal Williams.
Darrell Williams.
Who's
a sneaky. I didn't even realize he went to LSU. But this notion that the Raiders is some really good job, to me, more and more, like, I would say it kind of gets exposed. Like, do they have this great roster? Do they have all these good players? Now, Waller didn't play today. He was their best player in their team, but their defense stinks. It's not like everyone, Max Crosby's the next. He's got 5 sacks. Like, he's fine. He's a good player. He's a solid player. But I was watching the broadcast, like, yeah, you haven't heard much of him lately. You see Chris Jones? Like, that's what an all-pro, that's what a guy they gave $60 million to. See him today play Leatherwood? Leatherwood looked like me or you. So it's like, okay, well, they just used a first-round pick on him, and there are other first-rounders they cut. This notion that, like, the Raiders are going to be some desirable job, well, yeah, if Mark's willing to give some of these guys $80 to $100 million, which...
We got to pick the right guy, which is still a coin toss.
Yeah, more than likely, they're just going to continue to suck for a while.
I mean, look, I'm not shocked that... I gave him credit for that Dallas game. I didn't think they had that in them. We shouldn't be shocked. John Gruden, say what you want about his shortcomings. He is a good offensive coach. And he was a professional NFL head coach. Now, whether or not you think he's worth $100 million, he's a real NFL head coach. Agreed? They went from him to Rich Bisaccia, who I'm been rooting for. But it's not the same thing. So, of course, they're falling apart. That said,
100 doesn't quite feel what it did. Mel Tucker now gets 95.
No,
100,
it doesn't.
Rose
Now it
came
feels
off
like
the
a
balloon.
deal. Like Mark Davis is like, joke's on you, man. If I just kept him around, he would have been. I was saving money by like year 5.
He was right. He was ahead of the curve.
Because the one thing that happens all the time is, you have a good year. You're 2 years away from your contract expiring, get an extension. 10-year contract, it's a ways away from having 2 years left on your contract. I got you locked in, dog. The difference in the NFL, nobody leaves with time. Like college coaches just fucking leave. Just, I'm out. It's like, wait a second, there's 5 years left on your deal.
I heard Peter Schrager say maybe a couple of weeks ago on Bill Simmons, like, I wonder if coaches in the pros are going to start thinking like this, if this is the going rate for how much you can make.
What, go to college?
No, I'm saying just like I want to leave
away.
to go to the fucking 49ers. I want to leave the Saints to go to the Raiders. He's going to give me $150 million.
The problem for them is in the NFL, somebody is in charge. In college, nobody's in charge of the coaches.
Yeah. No.
Except Jimmy Sexton.
Yeah.
But, look, Gruden was 4-12, 7-9, 8-8, and this year it was at times looking good, but it wasn't guaranteed that they were going to make the playoffs, right? You agree with that? If Gruden was still the coach, would this definitely be a playoff team?
No.
So they hadn't nailed that hire. I've had this thought, and it's easy to make fun of me for this take. I know that. I'm going to say it. It's partly tongue-in-cheek, but partly not. If they ever got new ownership, I think they should consider changing their name and completely rebranding the organization. Now, that's not going to happen. They won't do that. The brand is powerful. I'm not trying to kick Raider fans when they're down. I have a lot of respect for Raider fans. You guys have been through a lot of shit. I mean that sincerely. We've talked to Raider fans over the years. But, I just wonder if there's just shy of a complete overhaul, a stench that you can't get out right now. Now, the fact is, even though I say that, the fact is just change of leadership is good enough. Changing your jerseys is far less important than changing your leadership. Changing your leadership matters more than anything else. And, if you figured it out, then it would make it all the sweeter if you could have the Raiders in the postseason. But right now, the identity is this. This is what the identity is of this franchise, unfortunately.
I think most people that would get really mad at you about changing the identity would be older people. Like, they just don't have that many young fans, and people can get mad at us. Like, we've seen the demos. There's a reason that, even while they were in this market, we talked a lot more about the other team in the market. They're just basic math. Now, listen, the football team did it. Now, it was forced upon them, but it's not that big a deal. Like,
kind of did it. Like, the colors are the same.
Well, yeah, to me, when you say rebrand, you mean change colors? Did you mention that too?
Oh, yeah. I'd change the name. I'd change the colors. The whole thing, the logo. The problem is the stadium's black and silver. But again, I say I would do it. I think it's a thought that I've had repeatedly. It really doesn't. It's not worth anything unless the leadership changes. And the leadership changing is far more important than changing your logo or your colors. But I would think about it in the end.
So let's say Elon or Bezos bought the team for $4.5 billion, and they said, "Hey, Middlekoff, Haberman, if you guys can scrap together $5 million, I'll give you a tiny little ownership. And you obviously you just sweeten stuff, but you can just run ideas through me. I know you guys are locked into football and just." I got me and The Rock are flying to the moon, and I got supply chain issues going on. Tornado just took out one of my warehouses. I got other shit going on. You guys are locked into football. I'm with you. My first would be, Jeff, you're in a new city, bright lights. Like, it might be Las Vegas Aces, Las Vegas, whatever. But like, let's pivot.
Bookies.
Yeah, let's love that. Las Vegas, exactly. Roulette.
I might even not lean into playing into a playing card. But again, somebody just Iceman, you guys are asking for death threats, LOL.
I think that's the move. I think you're right.
Yeah, well, but again, I say it only partly tongue in cheek because the reality is a leadership change is, and you and I have been on the record for years. We like Mark and we root for him to figure it out. But
the Las Vegas Teslas don't hate that. Yeah, there's a stench, and it starts with the Davis family. And listen, right or wrong, as long as they own it, consistently bad shit happens. It's just a fact, and they're consistently terrible in a league that breeds parity, and they can't sniff getting over the hump.
They got to get lucky here because there's not a history of doing in these situations.
But the one thing he has, like, let's say 5 good coaches are available, and like you're locked into 2 or 3 of them, he does have the ability to offer a lot of money to those guys.
He might get
And
lucky.
it is a
hope he
lucrative
does.
area to live.
Doesn't have to. I'm not. I'm sensitive when I say it's an easy to take a cheap shot and say just change the name. I'm not trying to be. I'm sensitive to it, but the point being, this thing needs an overhaul.
They need a change. They need, when we were kids and the Super Nintendo, something would and you just unplug it, separate from the
Hard
blow-in,
reset. Yeah.
just a hard reset. It used to have to do it like probably more consistently with like a decade-old computers and previous, a little less now. That's what they need. Just every single person. Oh, you've worked here for 15 years? You're done. Because I was reading a lot about Brian Kelly to LSU. He's ruffled some feathers. Just a couple guys. Like they had a strength coach named Tommy Moffitt who'd been there with Saban, Les, this guy. They've had a lot of institutional guys that like Patrick Peterson to Honey Badger to Jamar Chase. They swore by. They were devastated. Like, you can't fire Tommy Moffitt. First thing, Brian Kelly, like, listen, you might, like, you're gone. This thing needs an overhaul. And I heard this guy that covers LSU that played there just say, some of these guys are letting go. If you ask anyone worth their salt who's been around them, high-level LSU guys, they would say that guy's good at his job. But part of hiring this new guy in, and in college, when you hire like a Brian Kelly or a Nick Saban or an Urban Meyer, in a weird way, they become immediately like the owner, the coach, and the GM, right? Like when you hire Mario to the U, Mario's going to be making all the decisions football-wise, like he would be the owner of the U. And they just need, like, honestly, Jack did some of that, right, when he got there. But in the NFL, it's just hard to overcome the owner because they truly, like, I think with college, unless it's like Oregon where there's one guy signing all the checks, like, there's a lot of different moving parts, so you can play a lot. Like, in football, it's one fucking guy. Like, there's just a reason that guy hovers over. And honestly, the Yorks battle some of that too, but they just get lucky. They've hired Harbaugh and they hired Kyle. Like, ultimately, John Gruden, like, wasn't a great hire. Like you said, he was a professional coach, but he was nowhere near what they thought they were getting, right? That was part of the problem. It was like, yeah, he's a professional coach, but so is Jack. Like, John it turned out like, God, John has a lot of flaws for $100 million. Like, if John Gruden is the equivalent of what, like, LSU and Miami, right? They just gave, what Mario get, $85 million, and Brian Kelly got 90. So that's $170 million. If those guys turn into what Gruden was, people would be losing their shit after 3 years, right? They'd be apoplectic, like the people close to that program. And ultimately, I think a lot of Raider fans, I think everyone would tell you they were thoroughly, and I know me too, as just an outsider, I thought Gruden was going to come in like this Parcelsian offensive guy, and it turns out, God, he was just it was a bizarre experience. We're not talking about the emails I'm talking just his coaching, his talent acquisition, just his running a football team for 3 years and 5 games was unlike what I expected when they hired him.
Yeah. Kayla Demo says this team was humming with Ruggs and Gruden. Stop wolfing. The problem is when you zoom out 50,000 feet, every year it's something. Every year it's something, right? It's just over and over and over. Here's the bottom line. Let me read you something that Vic Tafur wrote before the game, okay? Here's Vic Tafur's. This is from Vic's article in The Athletic on Saturday. Arrowhead might be the perfect setting for Sunday's last stand, as the Raiders, now 6-6 after a 3-0 start, have to win to stay alive in the playoff race. At 6-7, there might be a slim mathematical chance, but the Raiders just aren't going to beat 4 good teams in a row after losing 5 out of 6. No, this is it. Interim head coach Rich Bisaccia, general manager Mike Mayock, and quarterback Derek Carr could all have their long-term fates sealed Sunday if owner Mark Davis decides to blow the whole thing up again.
I think Mark, I'm not trying to source guess here, but Jerry McDonald and Vic Tafur, who have been embedded with this operation for the entirety of Mark's ownership, right? Right, Mark took over in 2010 or 11.
These guys have been covering the team that whole time, yeah.
And they were even there before. They have a personal relationship with the guy. They have both said things about, and I would say,
good, like, to be clear, like good report, like these are like reliable, like what they say I read and enjoy.
These are journalists. Like
yes,
in a day and age when journalists are dying, like they're not going to exist maybe in 20 years. Like these guys are true journalists. I think, well, they're going to exist just much differently than currently the guys we grew up on.
Yeah, just God bless the non-team media. But
yeah, I think listen, we all know Mayock and the coach. I mean, they don't have a coach. They have an interim coach. I think what they are saying is like, Mark is not prepared to give Derek $130, $140 million. Is what they are alluding to without coming out and saying it. Like, Mark Davis has zero intention of giving Derek Carr a long-term deal. I mean, they're saying that without saying it. And I don't blame him. But, as we've talked, someone would, and he does have value, but he's had some moments without some of his best players where I think you go, God, would you feel great about giving this guy $140 million? I do understand that, like, his stance on that.
I mean, look, generally, tell me if you think this is wrong, when we say this is the opportunity, this is a spot where the owner needs to back out, hire somebody, and let him do his job, is generally around the time when an owner steps in and starts putting his fingerprints on everything. That's usually how this stuff works, right? The person in power, as things go badly, they usually don't step away; they step further in. And maybe this is what Mark Davis is about to do. My point being, to your point, is Mark Davis about to be the one to make the decision on the quarterback?
Well, it's already been reported.
Executive X, right?
Even a couple weeks ago, I think Lock and Fora wrote that. I think Graziano wrote that. Mark Davis is going to make a decision on Derek Carr before he hires a GM or a coach. So he's going to go into these meetings. I'm not extending this guy. And you're right. Like, that shouldn't be. I would say Mark's had a front row seat for 9 years. Mark's watched every one of his games. Would you feel great about giving him $140 million? Like the guy, but holy shit.
No, but I wouldn't feel great about my owner being my head scout either. Now, maybe Ron Wolf is telling him. Right?
Yeah. Howie Long, Bill Romanowski. I mean, he talks to all these people.
Yeah. Madden might be cutting up some tape.
I mean, John's sending text messages
to Harbaugh.
Yeah.
Maybe is that a group chat? Does it turn out Madden and Harbaugh is actually a group chat with Mark Davis?
I would love to see Harbaugh as a coach of the Raiders. Kind of like him at Michigan too, though.